Awareness, action, and acceptance are some of the descriptions which come to mind when thinking of autism awareness during the month of April. Likewise, words like cause, cure, epidemic, crisis, and suffer have also characterized autism awareness over the years. This year, Autism Answers emphasizes the need to increase interest and hope for inclusion, diversity, and equality through explanation, education, and understanding. The recent onslaught of threats and proposals to drastic cuts and changes to our medical, educational, financial, and legal system as we know it today, as well as rising concern for the health, welfare, education, and safety of individuals with disabilities, specifically those on the autism spectrum, has led me to open this dialogue on the socio-economic impact of autism on individuals and families facing this ever-increasing pervasive global brain developmental disorder. I dedicate this series of podcasts to children and families in the struggle for access to services, housing, medical, and financial assistance for their loved one on the autism spectrum. I know all too well the challenges that you face when attempting to gain access, enforce, and/or retain services and assistance. I pray God's healing power and deliverance over every individual affected by this disorder. Research suggests that social and institutional processes likely play an important role in the increase in autism. Some credit diagnostic criteria. Other factors considered include increased awareness and the sociological literature on health and inequality, and exploring how individual and community level effects shape the likelihood of an autism diagnosis. Social status affects one's life chances and outcomes, and I hold this to also be true in the case of factors determining outcomes for individuals on the autism spectrum. Health disparities are largely influenced as medical advancements increase in improved health. The educated and wealthy are disproportionately able to exploit those opportunities. Likewise, economic factors have a large influence in legal outcomes and success in gaining access to appropriate services and assistance for children on the autism spectrum. It is imperative that parents are educated on how to navigate the education and medical system as this billion-dollar enterprise systemically discriminates against the less informed, economically oppressed, and marginally educated. Parents will most often fight insurance companies, school districts, and local interagencies designated to provide certain services and assistance to cover their child's services and care, which are very expensive. Often parents are unsuccessful and find themselves emotionally and financially bankrupt. Working on your loved one's behalf is indeed a full-time job. I am reminded here of just how important a role that our medical system plays in the delivery of services and assistance that affects so many in this population. It is absolutely vital that we understand the ramifications of an overhaul of our medical and educational system as we know it today. Come with me and let's look at the history of Medicaid. Medicaid is the single largest payer in the United States for behavioral health services, prescription drugs, and certain ancillary services such as speech and occupational therapy. Medicaid was recently reported to serve better than 73 million low-income and medically vulnerable individuals. Home and community-based services are provided through Medicaid, with approximately $81 billion spent on such care and an additional $71 billion on other long-term care. Block granting Medicaid would limit the number of Americans eligible for Medicaid and narrow coverage for remaining enrollees. Block grants would end the open-ended federal funding and limit spending per capita. Targeted cost containment does not address the primary source of increased spending on Medicaid's growing enrollment. Medicaid has been the target of block grant proponents from as far back as the early 1980s under the Reagan administration, followed by Representative Newt Gingrich's proposal in 1995, and the Bush administration proposed block grant in 2003. Advocates of block grants make two claims. First is federalism, or the giving control of the grants to the states. Opponents argue states already have significant control of Medicaid and the way each state chooses to design and run their program. Second, proponents argue that block grants would eliminate the uncontrollable spending by setting limits on the program in advance. Block granting Medicaid would reduce, if not repeal, the guarantee of medical coverage to not only disabled people, but also to senior citizens, poor children, and pregnant women. The number of Americans eligible for Medicaid would be significantly reduced and the coverage narrow for those remaining enrolled. Let there be no doubt, if the cost for services and assistance that is afforded individuals with autism through Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act were repealed, this would result in drastic reduction, if not elimination, of medically necessary services which state and local funding institutions already struggle to meet the need and assistance of this population. Many children and adults suffer from immunological, biochemical, physiological, and gastrointestinal disorders, not to mention the need for behavior services, speech and occupational therapy, and home and community-based services, which gives so many of our children and families an alternative to institutionalizing their loved one. Not to mention the savings to states financially, where in many instances there is not sufficient funding and appropriate housing, schools, and employment to address the needs and demands of this population, both adolescents and adults. What we want children and families on the autism spectrum and the general public at large to know and understand is the significance of throwing Medicaid under the bus will inevitably adversely affect the outcome of recipients who in this address are the disabled and vulnerable that need the guarantee of medical insurance and assistance the most. I will leave you with this word. Who delivers the afflicted from him who is too strong for him, and the afflicted and the needy from him who robs him? Who, other than you, Lord Almighty? Psalms 35:10. Please tune in for our next podcast on education in the coming week. We thank you for your interest and support.